Welcome to episode 224 of Build Your House Yourself University by HiU. I'm your host and fellow student, Michelle Nelson, and together we'll learn the basics of home design and construction and demystify the building process so we can have less stressful and more enjoyable home building journeys and build quality dream homes with or without a general contractor. This week, I'll give you an update on my own project and go over some miscellaneous tips and tidbits I've learned over the last several weeks. But let's get started with a few shouts out. Shouts out go to Lee J, Kind Consumer, and Lady Tracy 5. You guys are so sweet. Thank you so much for listening and for taking time out of your schedules to write such positive reviews. You've helped me in the podcast more than you probably know. Those reviews publicly sing the praises of the podcast and act as recommendations for potential listeners. It's much more effective and believable when someone other than me recommends this podcast. So thanks to those of you who've written reviews and to those who tell your friends and family about the show. Okay, let me tell you what's going on with my build. I didn't want to give you another update until I actually had a structure to talk about. And now I do. We're currently framing, and I'm so excited. It's been a while since my last update, though, so here's a summary of what's happened so far. If you listen to past updates, you know that my home building journey has been full of schedule-altering struggles from the beginning. As you might remember, we had record rains and flooding in the pre-construction period that delayed the start of excavation, or clearing and digging of our lot. And when I say flooding, I don't mean a little flooding. I mean the river overflowed and streets and homes and businesses were infiltrated by several feet of water for days. Then when we finally started excavation, they discovered soil inconsistencies and instabilities that necessitated a foundation redesign. Here's what happened. They started the initial dig for the footings of my foundation and found a surprise. Now remember, the footings are the deepest, lowest part of the foundation. Like a foot is the lowest part of the body. The footings usually sit on stable ground. In fact, they need to sit on stable ground. And they're located around the perimeter of the slab foundation. We discovered that natural, stable ground was about 6 feet deeper than the surface of my house pad. And the house pad is where the house sits. So the structural engineer had to redesign the foundation to be not just a slab foundation, but a retaining wall slab foundation. A retaining wall had to be built on the north side of the hill on which my house will sit. That retaining wall is needed to retain or hold back the unstable soil and rubble that would be dislodged when they dug up soil for the footings. So the top edge of the vertical retaining wall connects to the edge of the horizontal slab foundation. And together, the retaining wall and slab are shaped kind of like the number 7. So steady progress was being made on the home's retaining wall foundation when the project stalled again. This time, the stall was due to COVID. Talk about an uncontrollable, never could have imagined delay. Because construction workers were deemed essential, though, in the midst of COVID-19 related shutdowns, work on the retaining wall and slab never completely ceased. But the coronavirus pandemic has caused significant delays. Interestingly, the amount of construction didn't decrease because of the pandemic. Instead, much of the country saw a sharp increase in home building and home improvement activities. COVID-related stay-at-home orders caused homeowners to spend more time in the house. And while housebound, people dreamed of ways of making their homes more multifunctional, recreational, and comfortable. And because of record low interest rates, lots of people made those remodeling dreams a reality. As a result, many new builds and remodels were initiated, and that put greater strain on tradespeople who were already in short supply. Because tradespeople were in high demand, that meant that fewer crew members were on the job site for completion of my home's excavation, retaining wall, and foundation work. In addition, There were multiple days when tradespeople were complete no-shows because they were trying to juggle multiple jobs. By the way, this happened even though I had a licensed general contractor working for me as a construction manager. Many general contractors say that tradespeople will show up for them, but they won't show up for owner builders. But obviously, that's not true. When tradespeople are in short supply, both licensed builders and owner builders might have to wait for trades to come to their job sites as scheduled. It took longer than expected, but by the end of the summer of 2020, the retaining wall foundation was complete, and it was time to order lumber. And then we stalled again, this time by choice. Average lumber prices nearly tripled from mid-April to late August 2020. Prices moved from a low in April of $348 per 1,000 board foot to over $900 per 1,000 board foot in August. This price surge added over $16,000 to the price of the average single-family home, according to the National Association of Home Builders. Several tens of thousands of dollars would have been added to a larger, higher-end home. Those initial lumber price increases were due to legitimate lumber shortages. Stay-at-home orders back in the spring of 2020 dictated that some lumber mills close. Mills that stayed open were tasked with keeping workers safely, socially distanced, and that resulted in fewer workers on site and reduced lumber processing. In addition, most mills made the decision to decrease their operations because industry experts initially predicted a big drop in construction. As we are now well aware, that prediction was wrong. Lumber was soon in short supply and in great demand, and prices soared. For my project, instead of making a potentially budget-busting lumber purchase at the peak of those historically high prices, we decided to wait. The hope was that prices would decrease in the fall, and they did, somewhat. The majority of our lumber was purchased in December 2020. It was about 20% more than the pre-pandemic quote we got. That was a modest price increase, and it was well worth the wait compared to what we could have invested at the peak of lumber pricing. Or should I say, the initial peak of lumber pricing. More about that in a minute. While framing was put on hold, other details of the project were completed. My site's long driveway was regraded, and electrical lines, water lines, and a conduit for cable and communications wiring were put in place. Framing is now well underway. They're working on the second floor. What I didn't realize is that you don't typically order all the lumber at one time in the beginning of the build. That's because there's usually not enough room for staging if all the lumber is ordered up front. The staging area is a place on the construction site where materials are offloaded from delivery trucks, stored, and prepared or assembled before they're attached to the house. There's usually not enough staging room on the job site for all the lumber required to build a house. And you don't want it just sitting there, because the longer the material just sits around, the more chance there is for the material to be stolen. So, because we didn't order all the lumber back in December, we've had to order more lumber in the last several weeks. And unfortunately, lumber prices have gone up again, and they're now back to those record high levels. As of this morning, lumber is back to $980 per 1,000 board foot. Listen, that is a ridiculous price, and it's most likely due to simple greed and price gouging. Lumber mills were closed for only a few weeks, and that was almost a year ago. They've certainly had enough time to recover from any losses or shortages they initially suffered. So now the thought is that the lumber industry is taking advantage of consumers by charging exorbitant prices for no good reason. I've heard that the National Home Builders Association is looking into the matter. But once again, we have a hard decision to make. You can build now with ridiculously high lumber prices and extremely low mortgage rates, or you can build later when lumber prices are likely to decrease, but when mortgage rates could increase. There's no right or wrong answer. You have to do what you think is best. For my house, framing has gone well. Framing seems to go extremely fast in the beginning, and it looks like they can frame the whole house in about 2 weeks. But then things slow down. I noticed a couple of minor mistakes. A couple of windows were framed too high, and there were extra pipes in the slab that weren't on the house plan. But those things can easily be corrected. They've already lowered the opening of the windows, and they'll cut and permanently cap the extra plumbing in a few weeks. And now we're going to lose another week and a half or so because of a winter storm that's hit the area. Snow, sleet, and record low temperatures. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this. It's another delay. But my husband and I always tell each other we're further along now than we've ever been before. So we're grateful. Finally, let me give you a few tidbits that I've learned in the last several weeks of actual building. These are just miscellaneous things that I learned along the way. None of them are particularly profound, just things that I thought might be nice for you to know. Number 1, during the hot summer, concrete slab foundations are usually poured very early in the morning, sometimes before dawn, so that the heat of the day doesn't dry the concrete too fast. It was dark outside when my foundation was poured. They had to shine lights on the site to see what they were doing. Number 2, thin cracks in the slab foundation are okay, even if there are several of them, and even if they develop within the first week of the slab being poured. It's just a natural part of concrete settling and curing. I knew some cracking was normal, but I didn't realize it could happen so soon after the slab was poured. Number 3, if you'll have a slab foundation, be very sure your house plan shows the accurate locations of all your first floor plumbing and gas fixtures before the slab is poured. The plumbers will place the pipes in the soil and gravel before the concrete slab is poured, and it's difficult to move them once the slab is in place. So did you hear that? The plumbers are in charge of installing water and gas pipes. After the pipes are placed in the ground, the concrete for the slab is poured around and on top of those pipes. In order to connect the plumbing and gas fixtures to those under slab pipes, the plumbers leave the ends of the pipes sticking out, ready to be connected to a fixture such as a faucet or a drain. The portion of the pipe sticking out of the slab, or wall for that matter, is called a stub out. The stub out is usually kept until it's time to connect the plumbing or gas fixtures. Number 4, framers, also called framing carpenters, are the tradespeople who put in the home's windows if you aren't hiring your window company to install your windows. If the window company does install your windows, your framers should charge you less to frame your house. Framing carpenters typically charge a dollar amount per square foot to frame your house. That cost ranges from about $5 to $10 per square foot, depending on where you're building and how large and complex your house is. That $5 to $10 is the cost of labor only, not the cost of lumber. If your framers will not be installing your windows, you should be able to take 50 cents to $1 off of that per square foot price. Now, if your window company offers installation, it may be worth getting them to put your windows in, even if it costs a bit more than your framers would charge. That's because if your windows are warranted, and they should be warranted, if those warranted windows have problems in the future with air or water leaks, for example, the window company that does the installation can't blame the framers for improper installation. If the window company puts the windows in, they're liable for any problems that arise with the windows. They can't blame the framers. Realize, though, that not all window companies have an installation crew. Number 5, framing carpenters use chalk or pencil to mark out walls of the house on the foundation before they start framing. I always wondered how they could accurately put up in place the walls. The reason they can do that is because they mark them out first. Take a look at the show notes for a photo of some of the markings on my foundation. Number 6, once cured, the concrete slab is perfectly safe to sit out in the elements for many months at a time. That's what my foundation guy assured me. Like I told you, after the slab was poured, we waited to purchase lumber. So my slab would just be sitting out in the elements. I asked the foundation contractor if we needed to do anything to protect the slab until we started framing. The answer was no. He said nothing would hurt that slab. Number 7, the slab must pass inspection before construction can continue. I think that slab inspection was the very first official inspection. Number 8, pocket door track hardware is sometimes put in place during framing by the framing carpenters. You'll need to have that hardware selected early on. Some people prefer for pocket door hardware to be put in by finish carpenters who typically install trim and cabinetry. Finish carpenters tend to be a bit more precise and detail-oriented as compared to framing carpenters. Number 9, if materials from the lumber yard are delivered and not used, as long as the materials are in good condition, they can be returned for a refund. And number 10, if you pay your lumber bills by a certain day of the month, for me it's the 10th of the month, you can get a 2% discount on your bill. Doesn't sound like much, I know, but it adds up if you're spending tens of thousands of dollars. But to get that discount, you cannot pay with a credit card. You have to write a check. If you have a credit card that allows you to get reward points for every dollar spent, you'll want to see if you would earn more in reward points than you would save if you wrote a check. And if that value of the reward points is greater than the amount of savings you get from writing a check by the 10th of the month, then it would be worth using your credit card. I only have one credit card and I only get 1 penny for every dollar spent. I had to call and ask them that. That translates into rewards of 1%. So paying with a check by the 10th of the month to earn a 2% discount makes more sense. Did you get that pun? It makes more sense. Okay, I hope that update and those tips and tidbits will help you to understand and plan your build a little bit better. Thanks for joining me this week. I hope you'll come back next time for the next episode of Build Your House Yourself University by HiU. Please remember that the purpose of this podcast is simply to educate and inform. It's not a substitute for professional advice. The information that you hear is based only on the opinions, research, and experiences of my guests and myself. That information might be incomplete, it's subject to change, and it may not apply to your project. In addition, building codes and requirements vary from region to region, so always consult a professional about specific recommendations for your home.